Good afternoon. This is Talking Trade Live with On the Tools. This is the only place where you can get your views across and listen to our comments on everything to do with the great industry we work in, construction. I've got two great guests this week. Katie, a crane operator, and Andy, a plumber. Welcome to you both. And firstly, let's get this topic straight out there because I think it's going to be one of the most heated live shows we've had. Construction sites and COVID. Who is responsible for this mess? Katie, good to see you again. Who's to blame for this then?
I don't think you can blame anyone, to be honest. Who could have predicted that something like this would strike us all down for the last few months? I mean, it's one of them things. I mean, you can plan for the best of things. You can plan for flooding. You can plan for strange weather and things happening like that. But how do you plan for a pandemic, which we haven't seen before? It's a bit of an odd one, isn't it?
It's a good point, but I think as well, if you look at the way the crap we're in before with apprenticeships and some materials each year, if it was bricks or blocks or timber or insulation, we've got a mental health problem as an industry. Andy, would you agree? It's hardly been plain sailing for the last few years, has it?
It's been very, but again, I think that, like Kate says, nobody could. This is just unprecedented, isn't it? There was nothing ever, there was no real guidance or anything like that because there's never been anything like this before. I mean, right at the very beginning, they said that obviously the plumbers were sort of, emergencies because we had to go out and make sure that people could wash themselves, and that if water was coming through the ceiling or they had a gas leak, they made it so that we actually go. So it was very difficult to go into people's houses and try and keep them safe and keep yourself safe and know what to do because nobody had ever done it before. You were getting sort of conflicting reports of what you should and shouldn't do and go to work or stay at home, and it was really quite, and even up to now, with the masks and stuff like that, when do you wear a mask, when don't you wear a mask, it's sort of conflicting guidance from the people who were supposed to be leading us.
But Andy, that's one of my points, is the guidelines. In England, construction workers went back, as you know, before anybody else, with no guidelines set or agreed. Still, do we wear masks? Are we meant to have a hand sanitizer with us at all times? I mean, I think, it's unprecedented, but where we are now, it's your guess is as good as mine, as good as the bloke next to us.
Well, I think that what we've got to do is, again, you've got to use your own, your own morals, your own sense, your own, you've got to think about what you're doing. Obviously, if I'm going into somebody's property, I want them to move everything out of the way. I ring them up beforehand, make sure they've got no, they're not ill or anything like that, or they're not isolating. And if that's okay, I'll tell them to move the stuff out of the area where I'm going to work because I don't want to be touching it. And I sanitize that area when I go there to work. I clean it all down. I wear gloves, I wear a mask, I wear shoe covers. And then when I finish the work, I polish it all down again, and then I leave. And then obviously when people want to pay you, you don't really want to be paid cash because you could have the virus on that. So, a lot of people now are paying electrically anyway. So that's a really good thing as well. So, yeah.
All right then, Andy, let me ask you one question off the back of that. There's a lot of extra time and money spent with sanitising and cleaning up. Do you pass that on to the client? Because I reckon over a month, you're going to be losing quite a bit of money, aren't you?
To be honest with you, yes, you've got to pass it on to the customer because it becomes part of the commodity, doesn't it? It's part of the job, isn't it? So it's sort of it might be a hidden extra, but it's not a lot of money. When you talk about it over a week, over a month, that kind of stuff. It's just something. I mean, a lot of people wear gloves anyway, and it's made me start wearing gloves, while I'm working because I don't really like working with gloves on because I don't know, I just can't feel things properly. But younger lads who work with me, they like to wear gloves, so it's just made me wear them anyway. So yeah.
Well, Katie, first comment is brilliant because it's brilliant for you because you work on big sites. Curtis, Danielle. I've worked outdoor on site throughout the COVID-19 session. Not once have the guidelines been in place. Well, firstly, you've had guidelines in place, Katie, but have you heard more of this as well?
I mean, there was a big outroar at first, wasn't it? Because people we like everyone else, large sites shut down because we didn't know how to handle it. So a lot of sites shut down until we could put things in place in order to get people back working again. And then people went back, and then there was a lot of photos surfacing because especially in London, the public transport wasn't in place for people because they cut the services. So there was too many people waiting for buses, waiting for trains. Then they would get into site, and it was just too many people. So they've had to change the way that they do things. So I mean, if we look at some of the really large sites in central London, we've got things like thermal imaging, which everyone has to go through at the start. We're not doing fingerprints or anything like that anymore because we don't want cross-contamination. All the canteen areas have had to be reworked. I don't know, did you see all the canteen pictures that I posted a couple on LinkedIn?
Yeah.
I mean, they were shocking. So I'd like to think, this is across the board and everyone's taking this in and knows what we have to do, and all these things are being taken on properly, but I'm sure they're not. And I guess I come from kind of a privileged point of view where we're doing everything we can to make sure this doesn't happen. Obviously, there's some things that need to be reworked, especially pouring concrete, things like that, where people sometimes can't get as far away from each other as they want. But it's just reworking method statements, reworking RAMs, and trying to figure out a way through it. I guess that comes with large companies and sharing good practice as well.
You would hope, Katie, that it is all large companies. Leighton McSorley, I've got good money that you work on a big site. COVID guidelines are in place, and this is probably about the 8th week we heard them. They still let you all use the same pen to sign in. I mean, it's all very well having everything in place, but suddenly you've got a few hundred staff that are using the same pen. So, that's another, issue which seems minor, but I think we need to look at it.
I hope people are, when these things happen though, because as much as we can think of and as much as we can put in place, there's still going to be these silly little things that are just really out there. So I hope people are putting them on cards or bringing them up to people and saying, look, why are we doing this? So I'm sure the moment that you throw that in someone's face, they'll go, oh crap, yeah, why are we doing this? Why are we still doing this archaic system that doesn't work anymore? And I'd like to think that anyway. I'd like to think the moment you bring it up, people feel really stupid and change it. But
yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, Andy, Tom Davis, he's made an honest comment, but one that you would have thought would be taken care of. Where are all the glove and mask disposal sites? If COVID is so dangerous, why have they not put up mask and glove disposal sites? It's a good question.
It's a great question, to be honest with you. But the thing with me is I work in sort of mostly domestic situations. So when you're talking about big building sites and stuff like that, the cross-contamination is going to be massive, isn't it? I mean, it's very difficult to keep away from people, even in just domestic dwelling. If I've got other builders working there, stuff like that, are they taking precautions? Well, some of the guys that I've worked with, they don't. They just take it as normal. It's just another day for them until something really happens to you or your family. Then obviously they're just going to just carry on like that. I mean, I think that they really do need to be looking at the the sites where you can put all this, let's say, dirty stuff that you can get rid of. Because if COVID obviously does stay on surfaces, then, if you're putting your gloves in a canteen or something like that, somebody else could touch them, couldn't they? And it could be, they could catch it.
Well, Ricky Louie's come up with a comment which is positive, which is great. The job he's got one-way systems where he works. He has to wear masks if working in close proximity, wipe down plant and machinery, and hand wash facilities, limited canteen use. So, Ricky, obviously you've got a firm that have put everything in place. Katie, why do you think it's only one firm here and there that are doing it and not all? Because big firms have responsibilities about staff's welfare.
Yeah, I think it's shocking that people are doing this across the board, because I think we're in a bit of a dangerous situation where everyone's gone back to work, and are we getting a bit complacent? The spotlight's kind of turned off of us. We've realised we need the economy to start working again. So are we getting a little bit complacent about what we're doing? My question to people would be, are you bringing up your problems on site? Are you talking to people about them? Are you almost, you shouldn't have to go down the road shaming a company and to change, but sometimes, as we proved when this all kicked off, sometimes shaming a company, putting the photos up of the canteen and going down that route does force change. It forces someone's hand. And if you've had all the conversations and things still aren't getting changed, then it's just not right. It's not the way it should be.
Andy, after your comment about things being touched and having COVID still on them, which has been proven, I pronounce it, hope it's right. It's either T or Ty, Lewis, depending if he's from Wales or not. Are all our materials from the suppliers safe to use?
Oh,
Valid point, isn't it?
yeah.
It is, yeah, it's very good. But you see, what happened to me right at the very beginning was, I think you had to choose whether you were going to work or not work. Now, I chose that. I've built 30 years clientele up, and if they're going to ring me up and they've got no boiler or they've got water pouring through the ceiling or gas, a gas leak, then I've obviously got to go. So I decided early on that that's what I was going to do. Now, as it developed, the merchants started opening again, and then you had to ring them up and order stuff, and there was all that kind of stuff. And then I got to a stage where there was a notice on the door, and it said if you were bringing anything back, to give back, they were going to have to keep it for 72 hours before they could touch it. And I said, well, what about the stuff I'm buying off you then? Do we have to put that in the middle of a floor and then wait 72 hours before I can take it away? It's crazy, isn't it?
It goes back to the fact that, yes, this was unprecedented and all the other fancy words, but I think the fact that we're coming out of it still, and what are we now, 16th of July, there's nothing that's that clear cut. Now, the title of this shows who to blame for the current mess. My blame, because someone's got to take this on the shoulder or the head. I think government and federations that are working on behalf of people in construction, working with government, have got to take this. We've had a comment from Paul Merson, Villa legend. I've got to read that out because bizarrely I'm a Villa fan. He's a new build house painter. He works for a company. Well, you can read that in the comment. We didn't even shut down during lockdown. Social distancing is and was non-existent, even filled in a COVID form. So some big house builders, you can very much see, aren't taking it seriously. Are we going to get to the stage where people are going to start catching COVID and then spreading it on sites, and we're going to get to that horrible situation? We're going to have death.
That's
Kate,
scary. And I think what's scary is, would it take that to change some of these sites? Would it take 10 people dropping dead and it being all over the newspaper and they go, this site, 10 people have dropped dead? I mean, that's really horrifically scary to me. I hope not.
Andy, do you think we're going to have to wait until that happens? Because sadly, I do.
Yeah, I do think that it's always the same. Any legislation is always led by deaths, and it sounds crazy, gas safe, they never change anything until somebody's blown a house up or something like that. Something really bad's happened, and that's when they decide to change things, rather than doing it before, precursor, and trying to make sure that it doesn't happen. Anybody can see what's going to happen, can't they? Anybody with half a brain can see that this is what's going to happen. This has happened in factories, this has happened on farms, hasn't it? People are catching this disease and then it's just spreading like wildfire. So yeah, it's going to happen. And what happens when, like, just for argument's sake, say somebody dies, can they then sue the company that's not done the right thing? It's endless, isn't it? It's just going to go on and on and on.
But Andy, your point is perfectly backed up by Simon Smith's comment. More guys, and I'm with him all day on this. If you've seen any of these previous shows, you know my position and our lovely friends that wear suits. More guys from the offices need to get on site more to see how restrictions work in real life. This goes back down to the difference between us trades that are working with our hands on a site or in a house, and then the suits in fancy offices, shuffling sandwiches around and looking busy. Katie, are you with that?
I like to think that tested out by everyone, and that people on offices do get out and about and see what's happening. I mean, as you know, there's often a site office divide, we'll call it, and sometimes there is a slight delusion about what goes on site and how things are done. And we do realise that the message that starts up here sometimes comes down here, gets diluted by some site supervisors, and you're thrown into things that you don't necessarily want to do. Yes, there needs to be a bit more transparency across the board between all of us. That was really diplomatic, wasn't it?
I remember, I can't remember how many years ago it was, 6, 7, 8 years ago, the latest Part P, the electrical regs were changed to 16th edition, and that was because an MP's daughter went to put something in the wall and went through a live cable and obviously killed herself, sadly. But now well, back then they were changed that you couldn't run your cables diagonally in a chase. You had to go through grids. Again, we're too reactive as an industry. What's going to happen when these bodies start dropping? That is the only time these people are going to listen, I think.
Well, I think you're right, and I do think you're right, to be honest with you. I think that's a very, very, very valid point. But, I mean, what I've found is that a lot of the people who work in office are still off on furlough. So all the people who you need to make these decisions for you aren't actually back at work yet. You know, they're just still, taking the 80% of their wages, whereas a lot of self-employed people have got to go back to work due to the fact that if they don't work, they've got no money. And most builders or people on building sites and that kind of stuff, they need the money. They're not, we're always, we do the main part of the work, which is using these to create wealth for a lot of people who, walk about in suits and, go in offices. But at the end of the day, we're thought of as a bit of a scourge rather than we are the main breadwinners who are going to win the bread for everybody else. And it's difficult, especially when they're still on furlough getting paid and we actually have got to get back to work.
This is Talking Trade Live. My name's Andy. I'm your host for the next, 15, 20 minutes. We've got a lively one today because we're discussing who is to blame for the current mess in construction. We've got Katie, a crane operator in London, and Andy, a plumber from Sheffield. Comments, please keep them coming in. Although the more I encourage, the less I'm going to read because they are flying in, and we've got some brilliant ones coming in. I will read as many as I can. The one that just jumped out, here we go. Phil James. I have engineers refusing to go on one. Oh, it's just disappeared. Sorry, let me get it back. I've engineers refusing to go on one site because of the close proximity to others. What can you do if you have a contractual obligation from before COVID? Where do you stand as a contractor? Katie, it's back to the government guidelines, as clear as mud, isn't it?
I don't know. I mean, that's a terrible situation to be in. Things shouldn't be that bad on that site. And the engineer shouldn't have to go on there if he feels his life is at risk he or she feels their life is a risk by going on site. But where do you fall back on and who's going to go? No, you're absolutely right to do that. You don't have to do that. And you're not going up against your obligations as a contractor.
Well, Andy, putting it back onto us as trades, because we're a great bunch. We love blaming everyone else, and that's what this show's clearly showing. But Josh VC, he's also made a good point. Trying to implement social distancing on site is useless when half the tradespeople aren't bothered themselves. And that is valid because I've been on a job where you just, oh, sorry, mate, and you brush past them. There's no social distancing. So we're to blame as well, aren't we?
We definitely are, yeah, because I think that, I must admit that I went on it was a big house that we were doing. It was sort of, I don't know, maybe 150 years old. And it flew across 4 floors. And there were 5 builders and 2 electricians and 2 plumbers. And so, it's very difficult to, keep away from people, isn't it? When you're in those proximities, it's like, you're walking up the stairs and then they just walk down at the side of you. And you think, well, this social distancing, why are we not all adhering to it and doing it properly? You just think that if you met them on let's say Tuesday, and then you went back to work on the Thursday and you're still all right, that everything's just going to be hunky-dory and everything's going to be fine. Well, it's not, is it? You wouldn't walk up to somebody in the supermarket, would you? And stand within, 1 feet of them, chatting to them, spraying in the face. It's weird how things happen. They think that because they work with you, that they know you and your background, and obviously they don't. It's difficult because anybody can catch this.
Well, we've got some positive comments coming in. As I say, it's going to be a lively one because we're trying to find somebody to blame for this mess we're in. But Kieran O'Sullivan, his boss is being very fair with all this and has said that at any point or sign that someone is ill on site working in the same property as me, I'm allowed to leave. Sorry to hear you're all self-employed, but he's PAYE. To hear, Katie, that his firm, his boss, is taking this seriously. So there is good news out there.
Yeah, completely. And to be fair, that's how it should be. I mean, you like to think that most of us are an honest bunch. I know nobody's going to take the piss out of the system or anything like that. But if you have genuine concerns, you shouldn't be made to work the way you have to work. There should be changes put in place so everyone feels safe going to work, whatever we're doing. It's the same thing, even before this, you should feel safe doing your job and going to work every day. Now we have slightly more restrictions, but we still need to be just as safe as we were before, and people still need to feel that security.
Well, let's go back to the reality of what we do in someone's house as a small company or on a site as, you know, someone like you, Katie. And that's looking at the reality of this social distancing when it initially came out, the 2 meters and all that. Sorry, we just another comment flown off here. Gary Brown, how can trades work apart? Not possible, either financially or physically. How can one man lift a little sheet of board? Now, I gave an example 2 weeks ago. We're in a room that's exactly 8 foot wide. We're lifting a 55 kilo soundboard. You need one at each end and then one with a dead man's lift. There's no way us three are going to be 2 meters apart. So is this, Andy, back to suits writing the guidelines that aren't in the real world?
Yeah, of course it is. And at the end of the day, you know, suits that sit behind a table aren't, you know, they're not boots on the ground. They don't see. Sometimes they don't actually go out to site. So I think that what we could realistically have done is people who make these decisions to actually get on site and see just how easy or difficult it is to keep, you know, social distance, because it's impossible sometimes. Like you just said, you know, you can't lift things up by yourself. You can't carry things on your own. You've got to get in people's space. So I don't know. I mean, you know, even like Kate was saying and yourself, was that if somebody shows signs or coughing or something like that on a site, or they've got a temperature, well, yeah, that's great to walk off. But there are people out there that don't even know they've had this disease, or before they've actually, you know, can pass it on to somebody, you know, before they've actually shown signs, they can still pass it on to somebody. So it's although it's a good sign, it's still a little bit irrelevant, isn't it? Because you're not getting out there, you know, the people are, you know, they need to keep social distancing. We need to wear masks. And I think that, you know, a lot of people, they say now that you're going to have to, from next week, wear masks in supermarkets, you know. So all I'm saying is, what about in offices, and what about other places that are enclosed? They need proper guidelines, and the people who are actually supposed to be doing this is the government that we're actually supposed to follow, are very wishy-washy about the whole thing.
The big thing is they're not in the real world. And, you know, I know it sounds a bit harsh because they're running the country, and listen, some people are fans of what they've done, some aren't fans. Let's take the housing minister. He was educated at Cambridge, studying history. What the hell does he know about building houses, laying bricks, insulating, new values, first fix, second fix, pitching roofs, social distancing on scaffolding? He hasn't got a Scooby-Doo. So this goes back to more people like us and other tradespeople being involved, advising them, because at the moment it's an absolute mess. The other comment, flown off. The other comment which I loved was Danelle Cow. Great name. It sounds like a South Sea Islander. Big fan of Samoa, Tonga, Fiji. So let us know where you're from. I work from a glazing trade association that we all know, Certas. We have put out a comprehensive COVID secure pack for our members on how to install windows safely in the home, provided a full RAMS template, Katie, and continually update the pack as government guidelines shift. Now that is what we need, but why is it only Glazing Federation that's doing that? Katie, it's great news to hear that, isn't it?
I think, it's brilliant. And I think it's going to be very hard if we expect something like that for each and every trade and each and every task we have to carry out. And I think that's where you have to take some responsibility for what you do.
Okay, what about the large, I mean, obviously without naming names, but what about the large building federations and member groups? Because they've got thousands and thousands of members, all paying a subscription. They say they're in with government, changing policy and improving apprenticeships and etc. I think they've got a lot to answer for, because Certas are not big. And I think what they've done, I'm a huge fan of. And I think we should really almost highlight that as an example. That the likes of federations and trade bodies and member groups fuck your ideas up and do something for your members.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's about sharing good practice as well, because we've all got to do the same sort of tasks, but if we're not sharing the information, if I come up with a really good idea about how to install something, keeping a distance, but I don't share it with anyone, then, you know, it's not good. We need to be able to feed these into somewhere. Maybe the unions, maybe the trade groups, who can reshare this information back out so people can actually use it.
Andy, are you a big fan of what Certas have done? Because I think we should be singing from the rooftops about this and flagging it up with others, because, you know, someone's come on this show and pushed what they've done. Let's celebrate some good news, because I've got to say, I'm impressed with that.
I think it's a great idea, but again, you know, I think that's fantastic for what they do, but it's not, it can't be spread out through every single trade and every single organisation, because everything's different, isn't it? It's not, and it's a bit like not one thing will fit all the different, different criteria. So the government coming out and saying one thing, it might be okay for me, but it's totally different for Katie because it's a different environment that we're working in. So it realistically needs something really strongly worded and something that is that's there for everybody to take notice of, because at the moment people they're taking notice of certain bits and not others because it doesn't fit in with their criteria of what they want to do. And usually it's the people in suits who are just trying to make money, and at the end of the day, the government has given billions and billions and billions of pounds out in loans, bounce back loans, all the different accreditations that they're actually giving money out, and so at the end of the day, it's about people's lives. It's not about money. It's about people actually dying, and it's not about money, and that's what gets it for me. And I think that we do need a governing body, and for everybody so that we can all, go back and say, look, this is what I've done, and this is what they've done, and I agree with this, but that's not a good idea. But because there's that many of us all shouting at the same time, that nothing's getting done about it.
Well, I mean, I'm a little bit stuck in my view on this, but going back to the larger federations and member bodies, I sat on a board for a large federation for nearly 10 years, and different people come and go, but you do have a good cross-section of tradespeople. If it's a plumber, a spark, a roofer, a bricklayer, or a company head that does new build, for example. So those types of boards that work in those federations that report into government, in my eyes, are representing all trades. So a paper could be put together, rather than choosing if they're going to have bourbons or digestives, actually put together a decent paper and take that to government if, as you say, you're in government. They say all the time, oh, we're with the housing minister and with small business minister. Well, let's look at this, because, we're not going to do this on our own. We're going to do what we think is best, but that might not be sufficient. And I think the problem we've got, Katie, is we're almost looking at the person next to us now thinking, are they doing it right? Do I need to copy? Where do you think this guideline needs to come from? Is it government, or is it a bit lower down in terms of, federations? I'm not going back to Certas because I've been honest in how good what I think they've done, but federations looking after all trades need to do a bit more, I think.
No, I agree with you. I don't think it's government. I think it'd be very hard for government to rule to us what we need to do without fully understanding what we actually do. I think that's why it needs to be a bit lower down, and it needs to be a collaborative approach on what's already there. So, like the larger sites have had to put a lot of measures in place, put a lot of work into method statements, put a lot of work into RAMs in order to do things correctly. So I don't know, is this information being shared? Is it being shared with other people who are doing the same tasks? Is it being shared with other people who are doing the same job? Is it shared between smaller sites? There should be somewhere where this information can be funneled down. Yeah, we've put a lot of effort into it, but this is information to keep people alive and to help everyone. It should be completely shared.
Well, you mentioned that, Katie, shared. Where do we go for the latest information? If I'm a bricklayer, you're a crane operator, Andy's a plumber, Dave's a roofer, we need to have a central point where we can go for the latest information and updates. And we had a comment there from someone about a pub, which grabbed my attention. Where was it? He said, Matthew Emery, why do I have to wear a mask in an empty shop, yet the busy pub next door, I don't have to? This goes back to the clarity of this. We need things clarified. Andy, back to the point that we've been mentioning about us boots on the ground, the men and women, the trades on sites and in people's houses. Do you think maybe there should be a task force set up to advise government? Because at the moment, we're not being listened to because there's no one there to listen.
No, and I think that right at the very beginning, when all the construction workers were the first ones back, it was a little bit like, they were doing the experiment on us to see if it was safe enough for all the other people to come back out again. It was, that's what it felt like, and that's what a lot of people were saying to me. We're just a cannon fodder to make sure it's going to be okay for other people to come out from behind their settee and then come out into the real world like we've had to be forced into. And again, I think that your trade bodies and all that kind of stuff, they're not going to really. I know that you've got the one there, but there's not really going to be sticking their neck out saying this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do, because again, who's going to police it? Who's going to be the one policing all this for people who aren't doing stuff or are doing stuff? And it's massive. There are millions of us out there. There's not just, it's not like just, the police federation that have got a governing body to look after them. We haven't got anything. We haven't got a voice really. And that's why when Katie was saying about, it coming down to governing bodies, which I totally agree with, I don't think that that'll happen, because there's nobody getting out there and sticking their head above the parapet and saying, look, listen to us. This is what we're going to do. This is a great idea. And this is what you're going to do. And this is what we should follow. And everybody do exactly the same, because people just, it's not happening. It's just not happening, is it?
It's not happening. And Pete Evans has said what probably a lot of us are thinking. I'm seriously thinking of jacking it all in. He's trying to organise materials, which we know there's massive shortages all over the country, and having to book to pick it up, it's just the last straw. Are we going to see more and more people quitting the industry?
Scary, isn't it? As we both, as we all know, we went into in a skill shortage, and we find ourselves in the same position coming out the end of it, because people are getting fed up of it, and people can't deal with it, and people don't want to deal with the things that they're made to deal with, jumping through hoops just to get materials to get a job done. It's a waste of time, isn't it? Time is money. So it's a bit scary.
And it's a bit scary. And, talking as a self-employed tradesperson, you look at your average day, you're up at the crack of dawn, you go to work, you work yourself to the bone, you finish, you go and look at a job, you come back, you price it up, you put the kids to bed, you start doing contract. Oh shit, I've got to eat something. Oh, it's bedtime. Sleep, repeat. So suddenly adding all this extra stress, it's going to cause problems with mental health, which has gone through the roof. The construction charity, the Lighthouse Club, their calls have gone up 55% during lockdown. So we know that things are getting worse. Apprentices are going to be running scared even more so than usual, because, how's this an appeal to any youngster? This is Talking Trade Live. This show has been heated, it's been energetic, and it's been very well voiced by all you trades watching. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. We've got a few minutes left. Thanks for all the comments. Apologies that I've not been able to read them all out. I would just like to finish with a sort of positive bit of advice from our two brilliant guests. Andy, what would you like to see happening moving forward? Are we panicking over nothing, or are we got to start taking it on the chin ourselves and actually doing a bit more, taking some responsibility?
I think personally we've got to take it on the chin and just carry on, because that's what we've always done. It's the good old British way. We just suck it up and just carry on. I mean, I've been plumbing for 40 years. I've had that many ups and downs, recessions. Then the next thing we're earning loads of money. Then the next thing it's a struggle. I just think that we could do with, at this time now, just a bit of leadership, just a little bit of help, just to help us through, because it's not easy. And like you said, you're working all hours God sends just to make a living. And so who in the right mind as a young person would want to come into the trade, the building trade? And it's very, very difficult to get people in. And like Kate says, there's, such a shortage of people who are trained, who are training up to do this. It's just, what's going to happen? There'll be nobody to do it soon.
Katie, are you agreeing with Andy? Because it's not looking great for construction, but as we all know, once you're in it, it's a bloody good industry to be in.
No, it is fantastic. But yeah, I think we're at a real risk point of taking our foot off the accelerator. So all the hard work we put in before this to change things, to get people interested, to keep the industry moving forward, then this has struck. Everyone's changed what they're doing. People aren't recruiting as much. People aren't taking on as many apprentices. So what are we going to come out the end of this way? That's what scares me. On a positive note, I'm really glad that the big sites are doing it very well. And we've seen quite a few positive comments from a lot of different people who work on sites, who are saying their managers are handling it very well. They're using one-way systems. Things are working for them. And that's really positive. But we need everyone to take on this change. We need sites of all sizes to take this seriously, because it's not going anywhere. We haven't got a cure for this. And I don't want people to be dropping dead before we actually take some notice and take this really seriously.
Sadly, we have run out of time. Katie, thank you ever so much. Andy, thank you ever so much. It's been a cracking show. We've had some brilliant comments. Looking at half the comments coming in, jeepers, they would do a better job than the current troops in government. So maybe that's an option. Maybe a task force needs to be set up by trades, working with government and advising them. The great news is that you don't have to wear a mask in a pub. So I'm off down the boozer. See you next week.
Thanks.